Well, I think there's nobody's escaped this war. I mean, after 2.5 years, almost 1,000 days, it's just gone further and further, deepening, depressing, grinding poverty for so many people. And there are millions of people sitting at home who are too embarrassed or stigmatised to come out and beg or put their hand up and say that they can't cope anymore. And many people reverting to negative coping strategies as well, because the situation becomes so dire for so many people in this country. There are people dying in corners, people dying silently, people not being able to get the treatment they deserve. And the systems, the economic system, the health system, the water system, all of it's collapsed. And unless we get the chance to break this blockade and bring in more fuel and more support, then more and more millions of people in this country will suffer.
But by breaking that blockade, aren't we opening up the door for the Houthis to bring in more weapons to fuel their fight?
Well, I mean, for me, is that there are already checks and balances outside. There's a UNVIM, the United Nations Verification Inspection Mechanism. There's a Saudi-led coalition forces offshore, and they vet every single boat that comes in above a certain weight, 100 tons and below. They don't. So the goods that are coming in, they can screen those goods. So I would say that let's improve those stringent measures even further and allay the fears and the concerns and open up the ports so that we can get in the fuel and the medicine and the food that we need for this part of the country.
You've been here for 2 years now. How have you seen the situation change over those 2 years?
Well, to be honest, it's pretty depressing. I've been here for 2 years, and I just think every day is one step closer to the darkest misery you could possibly get. I feel really frustrated the fact that I've not been able to change things at all. Everything, more and more people dying, more and more people struggling to feed themselves and their families. No one knows how they're going to feed their families tomorrow. 7 million people on the brink of starvation. Cholera, the biggest case ever in the world. Diphtheria is now breaking out. These are medieval diseases. These are telling you that your systems are collapsing and people cannot buy the medicine, they cannot buy the goods that makes it easy for them to do that.
Is the United Nations doing enough? Are you able to reach all the people that are in need?
Well, we have only received 60% of the funding we require for our appeal last year. And in that time, you've had the blockade, which has increased the prices for many millions more people. It's way out of their range to buy normal things. At the same time, we've had cholera, which has impacted not just the health, but the social, the sort of resilience of individuals. And we've had this diphtheria as well, and the economic collapse. So while we measured last year 60% of the funding we received, next year's going to be harder. We're not going to have the ability to feed that many people because we'll probably get the same amount of money, but the needs are bigger and the prices are going to be higher. And because we're not using Hudaida port, our ability to deliver food is going to be much more expensive.
We've heard a lot about the blockade, but we also know that you're facing problems here on the ground to do the work that you do, to distribute aid. Sure. Can you tell me more about that? Well,
I mean, in any conflict of this kind, you get the parties who run that area, that geographical place. They always want to put controls on you. They want to move your food a certain way, control your food being delivered a certain way. And we face it in any crisis, and we face it here, we face it in all parts of Yemen, both north and south. So we have a constant battle to talk to these parties to say, you have a responsibility to allow us unfettered access to populations in need. And we have to keep reminding them they have an obligation under Geneva Conventions. And, it falls on deaf ears many times, and that's why we've this constant battle. But at the same time, when we notice something has happened and aid diversion has taken place, we have got strict mechanisms to go and actually go to the authorities and say this is unacceptable. And often we can get it reversed, but sometimes we don't.
I mean, you're from the UK. Do you think the UK is doing enough to support Yemen, to help Yemen?
I don't think the international community is doing enough to affect a change in Yemen. I think politically it's in a cul-de-sac. There's no progress whatsoever. I think the diplomatic effort and the pressure is glaringly absent for the change that needs to be taking place at the political level. We need the funds, and we get funds from the UK and other governments, and they're very well received because we need them. But at the end of the day, we're not going to cure this problem by the humanitarian situation. We're going to control it and stop the military activity because there's no victory possible in this country, and get the political thing going in a much more balanced, objective way, which has not been the case till now.
Why is that?
Well, I think there's a lot of vested interest here. I think the regional situation, I think the dynamics in the region make it very difficult for member states to take a position which will affect change here on the ground. So what you have in Yemen is a very weak country in a very poor situation, pitted against some very large forces. And it's very difficult for them to have a voice that will be carried. And that voice is broken because of the different elements in this country. And I think till we get the people back around the table again discussing what needs to be done to stop this, and let these politicians and leaders put their own vested interest interest and narrow political interest aside, and for once start looking at the people in this country, because you never hear that mentioned. There's any care or anything about the survival or the livelihood of the lives of these people.
But you've seen a lot of pushback in Parliament about Yemen recently. Andrew Mitchell has made very powerful statements and actually mentioned you and your team. What needs to be done? What does the UK need to do? What are they lacking?
Well, they have to translate that word into actual pressure. I mean, there is a glaring lack of pressure beyond the words. There's been words come out of the US, there's words come out of Europe, there's words coming out of the UK and everywhere else, but it's not translated into a pushback on this action, to stop the military action, to end this war, to allow the blockade to be open fully and allow goods to come in here so prices are cheaper for people to survive. We need more funds to address the humanitarian concerns in this country. And the politicians who are in the country, who are connected to this, and the wider, including the UN, have to get those people around the table with a no option. This is the only option on the table. Politics.
Why do they have to do that?
Because it's not going to be cured by our humanitarian endeavours. All we're doing is keeping people alive, and we're not even doing that well enough. And at the same time, the military is not going anywhere. We've been stalemated in this country, and many parts of this country are military lockdown, no progress getting made, one step forward, three steps back, a continual cycle of that. Meanwhile, people are dying on a daily basis because of the military. And the only solution is political. So the political people have to get around this table and take a real, full-hearted approach at fixing this.
If something isn't done soon, what do you think will happen?
Well, I mean, I think there's all sorts of scary scenarios, but the scary scenario is people will die in big numbers. The blockade has stopped the fuel and the food and the medicine coming in. We're not able to operate as easily with the access we need in this part of the country, in the northern part of the country. So we're not getting to the populations in need. We don't have the resources to deal with all the populations in need. So all of that is going to be compounded, I think, or consolidated into a situation where millions of people in this country will tip into a zone or an abyss or a famine that once you start moving in that direction, you can't slow it down.